Good evening, Des Moines. Welcome to the Doc and Lefty program here on webcast1live.com. Coming to you from the very plushly decorated for Christmas skywalk in the downtown Des Moines. I'm Lefty, and he's back, everybody. The doctor is in. We missed him last week. He was out rampaging across the countryside over in the middle, in the westernest part of the Middle East. He's back from Istanbul. Doc, how you feeling?
You know what? I'm going to warn you not to eat the ambassador breakfast over there. Otherwise, I'm feeling pretty good.
You know that sounds like a pretty Americanized kind of thing. So I would wonder maybe it wasn't the ethnic food that got to you. It was something else.
It was the breakfast. It was the breakfast at the hotel. That's what got me.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that.
Turkish cuisine. I mean, honestly, it's pretty good stuff. I will tell you, I made a decision to go over there, and it's one of the very few times I ever go do anything just for me. And I wanted to see a lot of the history. I'm a big history buff. I was wanting to see everything over there, and I got to see a lot of really cool things. However, they were very clear when I landed at the airport to stay right in my area, that they have troops all around this area. It's called Sultanahmet, and it's where all the cool stuff is because of the unrest, especially with the Kurds and everything else. So as I landed, I thought, I should have gone to Kiev or Odessa like I like to. Write my books and things like that. And second day I was there, I turned on the TV, and there's the Ukrainians protesting in Kiev.
And we'll get to that. We'll get to that because that's what I wanted to talk to you about the most. But I wanted to wonder because
give me a second on this one. But here I am, and I try to get on Skype. The internet's too poor. I must have gotten 40 emails from friends of mine saying, I hope you haven't come to the Ukraine because it is a war zone over there. So
well, and that is something that I've been, ever since that bubbled up last week, I've wanted to talk to you about that because of your unique relationship with that country and your long expertise in dealing with those Balkan politics. But
now, did you have problems getting down here today?
No,
with the fog?
I did not.
It was the traffic was pretty slow out on 235. I just want to tell everybody, this is supposed to be a fog advisory until tomorrow afternoon. So be careful when you're driving around out there.
It was rough going to the office on Highway 5 this morning, but other than that, I wanted to talk to you since you went to Istanbul. When did you fly out?
I flew out a couple of Saturdays ago, got back last Friday. It was just a short trip.
Just after the holiday. So you spent Thanksgiving Thursday in Istanbul. Now, were you able to see any of the signs of their own particular unrest? That Istanbul was inflamed a few months ago, protests against the president and his administration over usage of public spaces. And did you see any of that?
Where I was at was strictly tourist, and they understand that Istanbul brings in a ton of money. In fact, where I was at, foreigners outnumbered the natives significantly, and they run all kinds of tours and everything else. I will tell you, I was reading the papers over there, and it looks like the Turkish government is slowly on its way to recognizing the Kurds, which, everybody's up in arms about. I mean, they're afraid that, the Kurds are going to be bombing everything in sight, and, that's the big fear. And they've actually now referred to the northern Iraq no-fly zone as Kurdistan. Uh-oh. I think Ed wants back in. I'll let Ed in.
Oh. Sorry for that, folks. They're talking about Kurdistan. So what's up?
So Kurdistan, they've actually changed some of the words that they're using to describe the area there. And they have very carefully avoided the words Kurdish state and the rest of it. Mm-hmm. But on this latest negotiation, apparently the prime minister has used the term Kurdistan, and that's a big deal. The people in Istanbul themselves, whenever I try to bring up some of these things, because I'm always talking politics to everybody, we're very careful not to really say anything one way or another. One of the concessions that the Muslims are starting to make is that they're giving up control of the prep schools from the imams to the Turkish state. And I'm not quite sure how that's going to play out. The EU in general was not in favor of this. However, the Turkish government was saying, we basically feel these prep schools are not helpful to Turkish autonomy in the long run. So these madrasas, the prep schools, are slowly being transitioned into the state-run school system.
Well, and that is really strange given the very pro-Islamist presidential administration over there right now. The president is a confirmed Islamic, just a really committed Islamic person, wants to see the country kind of go the route of an more Islamic state. I mean, since the Turkish state was developed back in the early part of the 20th century, the modern Turkish state that is, Turkey has been a secular-run country with a strong military and a fairly weak civilian government. And this, I apologize, Doc. Maybe you remember the president of Turkey's name, but since he was elected, that has shifted a lot. He's very popular and has been, instituting reforms to move Turkey into a more Islamic direction, which has led to some of the protests that I spoke about earlier.
Well, and the truth of the matter is he's still doing this, but you have to keep in mind, there's a lot of pressure from the EU to, maintain their statist government, and two, there's a lot of pressure from NATO and their allies to make sure that they don't go into a rogue state. And three, there are a lot of people that are not Muslims that live in Turkey.
That's right.
They have a very large Coptic population. They have a very large Russian Orthodox, Greek Orthodox, Ukrainian Orthodox. There's a large Jewish population in there. So there's a lot of reasons why this guy's trying to walk this fine line. The other thing is I believe from the papers I read that in Turkey, much like Egypt, unlike Egypt, the military doesn't run Turkey, but they are supremely influential. And what they see is a lot of problems. And I think what Turkey is trying to angle to do is the main problem that the Turks have are the Kurds. If there is a way that they can get the Kurds so that they're not always attacking and bombing, that's in their own best interest. And I think that is in part what's pushing a lot of the more moderate stances that this pro-Islamist president is taking.
Well,
we're going to be right back after the break. You're listening to Doc and Lefty on webcast1live.com. We'll be talking about international law and politics, and we have some juicy local tidbits coming up for you as well.
Petrosian Associates, how can I help you?
Bertrosh and Associates will provide you with a friendly, caring, and confidential place to find help for mental health concerns. We are ready for your call. Our doctor, Dr. J. Patrick Bertrosh, provides a full range of psychiatric services for children, adolescents, and adults in a forthright and informative manner while maintaining a casual, comfortable, and relaxed atmosphere.
Get away from us, you mean old credit card. We don't have any more money. We're in trouble now. Save us! Help! Somebody save us! Somebody help! Help! Save us!
Hi, I'm Tom Coates from Consumer Credit of Des Moines. If your credit card's a little too animated, give us a call.
Hooray! We're saved! Consumer Credit! You're our hero!
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
Welcome back, everybody. Thanks for tuning in tonight. Doc, you were trotting the globe all last week and parts of the week before, and so I thought tonight would be a really good time to talk about a lot of international stuff. You and I both love talking about international politics, international events. There certainly are always a lot of them. I remember I think we spent almost 4 straight weeks talking about Syria and the ins and outs there. And when I heard that you were going to be in Istanbul, which is a hop, skip, and a jump away from your beloved Ukraine, and the events in Ukraine just exploded. Really, not out of nowhere. It's been simmering for a while. I don't want to suggest that this was a sudden kind of thing, but the president who kind of won in a fixed election, relatively popular, and now this issue with the Eurasian zone, the European Union, the Eurasian Union, the European Union, Vladimir Putin, as a Ukrainian observer, what's your take on this?
Well, let me talk a little bit about Syria first, because you mentioned we talked about.
Sure. No, ignore my setup, but that's fine.
No, that's okay. That's okay. We should have been. We haven't been talking too much in the breaks. Usually, we've got this better plan. The Turks. One of the interesting things the Turks said is they came straight out and said, we cannot allow the other Western powers to fix Syria. It is the Muslim countries ourselves that must fix Syria. And of course, the Muslim countries are equally divided between who to support in Syria as well.
Right.
Part of this unrest that's going on in Ukraine is in part a spillover from Syria. Now, you said that this president is relatively popular. He is not. He is very unpopular.
Well, now he is.
No, but he was unpopular before. You have to keep in mind that the Orange Revolution was specifically designed to keep him from power. And this latest and remember, the Russians poisoned the other, it's not Timoshenko, I forget the guy's name.
Well, she's in jail.
Yeah, she's in jail.
Is it Yanukovych is the guy who's in power now?
Yeah, yes, he is.
Okay.
And so then Timoshenko's in jail. They're keeping her in jail. The Germans and the entirety of the EU are pressuring him to let her go, but he's not. They put together coalitions. Like here, our representatives go to the House and Senate, and regardless of what party you're from, you're going to have to work together with each other. That's not the way it goes. If you are elected, you go there, and then you may get appointed or you may not be appointed. But there's all kinds. I mean, the Human Rights Commission from the UN said it was a crooked vote. There's all kind of, Russia spent billions of dollars trying to get this guy elected.
And I wasn't making the case that he was elected legitimately. I think most of the people that are all the people protesting now have that view that he rigged the election. What I meant by relatively popular is that, and the thing that's most kind of glossed over with this whole EU Vladimir Putin fight that they're kind of talking about more so than what's going on in the streets in Ukraine is this idea that Ukraine is a completely EU-loving country, and it's not. There's deep divisions. There are very significant pro-Russian government populations in Ukraine. That's why I wanted to talk to you about this so much, because it's so volatile.
Well, let's there's a couple of things. Ukraine is split almost in half, and the northeast part of Ukraine are mainly Russian. Southwest part of Ukraine is mainly native Ukrainians.
More westernized kinds of
not even westernized,
European population.
Well, because Russians are Vikings and Ukrainians are short, dark, curly haired. I mean, we're talking phenotypes.
Sure.
And what you have is Russians and the Ukrainians don't mix that well. They simply don't. You have to keep in mind that the Ukrainians suffered greatly under Stalin.
Yes.
And people don't forget that. Russia imported a lot of Russians during the communist years and exported a lot of Ukrainians. So what you have are Ukrainians who want to have a Ukrainian language, a Ukrainian nation, versus people who say, well, you know what, I'm Russian. But even one of the funny things is there are several Russians at the hotel I was staying at. And one of the servers asked this lady, well, geez, are you Russian? And she says, no, I'm Ukrainian. Well, it was very obvious. She was tall, Nordic, clearly Russian descent. But you have to keep in mind there's a wave of nationalism. The people you talk about, when you talk about they identify strongly with Russia, you're talking people that are in the generation ahead of mine. Mm-hmm. My generation, you have to keep in mind, my generation over there remembers times when they didn't even have gum.
Right.
Gum was first introduced to Ukraine in 1994. So they know and understand what it's like to be part of Russia. And a lot like Vladimir Klitschko, the Klitschko brothers,
Right.
they're opposition leaders. There's a lot of people there that are famous from around the world that have gone back home. Now you don't hear much about the famous Russian or Ukrainian beauties, both the Milas Jojovic and Kunis, but they actually do go over there. Mm-hmm. They're filmed. They're filmed with the protesters. And what I have noticed since Yanukovych has been elected, before this, you would have people go down there and they would celebrate down at Independence Square. And I can tell you, if I stay for 3 days in Kiev, which is what I usually do, there is a protest. There was a protest about tax hikes. There were protests about Timoshenko. There's protests every weekend. Now, what's scary about this one is I usually do go to Ukraine, relax. I write books. I see a lot of orphans and stuff. And I decided not to this time. And the picture that they showed on Fox News about the protesters being attacked by the police,
right?
That was right in front of my apartment that I usually rent when I'm in Ukraine. So these people were getting shot at, beat up right where I usually stay. And they're estimating 300 to 500,000 people in this area. And Independence Square isn't much bigger than the Loop downtown. So you're talking about taking the entirety, half of Des Moines, and cramming it into that area. Now, what they're really upset about is they understand their economic prosperity has nothing to do with Russia. Russians beat them up, bully them all the time. They try to kill their leaders. They cut off the gas. They do overflights. And right when the Russians looked like the Russians were going to get out, or the Ukrainians could force Russians out, the Yanukovych went ahead and said, well, you guys can stay as a military presence for at least another 30 years. Well, that really upset Ukrainians. So you have all these people, mainly my generation and younger, saying we have an opportunity to embrace the West. We are European, right? They've been termed Europe's breadbasket. And suddenly you see this turn away. Well, and the other thing is Yanukovych is crooked. Putin will do whatever it takes to make sure he maintains Ukraine, because without Ukraine, Russia is really nothing. They have a difficult time feeding themselves. The other problem is with they have the Poles, they have the several other countries in this Central European bloc, and without Ukraine, that bloc falls apart. And they were sympathetic to the EU. So you have this thing where Ukraine is the linchpin of the entire area, and it's such a huge deal for Europe and also for Russia. Now, after the break, I'm going to tell you a couple of conspiracy theories that I have about this, because I know Lefty loves my conspiracy theories. And thanks for tuning in to Doc and Lefty, listening to us on webcast1live.com.
Bertroche and Associates will provide you with a friendly, caring, and confidential place to find help for mental health concerns. We are ready for your call. We are proud to work with military personnel and their families. Our doctor, Dr. J. Patrick Bertroche, provides a full range of psychiatric services for children, adolescents, and adults in a forthright and informative manner while maintaining a casual, comfortable, and relaxed atmosphere. Our licensed mental health therapists provide individual counseling to children, adolescents, and adults, including couples and marital counseling. Visit our website at bertrocheandassociates.com for more information, or call 515-334-9484. Our offices are located at 5525 Meredith Drive in Des Moines, just east of Skate North off Merle Hay Road. Isn't it time to talk to someone? Take care of yourself and your family. Contact Bertroche and Associates.
Hey, welcome back, everybody. This is Lefty with Doc and Lefty here. We do this every Tuesday, 6:30 to 7:30 p.m. On webcast1live.com, where you can listen to us live via the streaming internet service or whatever you need to use. The show goes up on YouTube shortly after. We're fairly active. Well, Doc is fairly active on Facebook and other social media. We do have a website, www.docandlefty.com, where you can check things out. I know, and we're both getting used to putting some things together for the blog there and other content that we'll be generating here over the next few months. in the lifespan of a radio show, a year is pretty young, but we think that we're getting sort of a handle on how this is going to go, and so we do appreciate all your support, and certainly do to support in turn the sponsors that make this all possible. Now, Doc, we're talking about the problems. Well, the demonstrations. I don't know. It's not necessarily conflict or problems on a bit large scale yet, but it's going in that direction. And in preparing for in Ukraine and in preparing for this show, I did a little bit of research and listened to some news reports, and I wanted to get your take on some of the perspective that some Ukrainian scholars were putting on this. One who I listened to yesterday was talking about how Ukraine is so vital to the Russian sense of its empire, and that through this push for the Eurasian Union that Vladimir Putin is a gigantic champion for, that really what he's angling for is the rebirth of the USSR under a different, less communistic, but nonetheless Russian-controlled organization, where he brings in all the old Soviet satellite countries, and has this big Eurasian Union to compete with the European Union. Ukraine stands as the biggest cultural but also geopolitical piece of that, because one, the Russians, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but the Russians see Kiev as the historical capital of the Slavic people. The Slavs emanated from Kiev, and that's where really the Russian heart was born, and the origins of Russian Empire across the Balkans and into Russia itself, into the main part of Russia itself. But also from a geopolitical standpoint, as you mentioned in the last segment, it's right in the middle. And without Ukraine, that means there's a huge just wall from between Russia and the rest of that sort of Eurasian, Middle Eastern kind of in the Turkey, Syria, even all that kind of stuff kind of gets blocked off when Ukraine becomes more of a Western country because of its geographic position, but also its economic influence around that part of the world. And what are your thoughts on that?
Well, you hit it right on the head. The original Russian Empire was called the Kievan Rus, and it was based obviously in Kiev. It was also based in Lvov, and then the Poles had part of it, and the Lithuanian Empire was based in Lvov, which is part of Ukraine. So historically, the Russians really there's a lot of cultural similarities. The other thing that's important that you have to keep in mind is every ounce of gas and oil and all the energy piped to Europe comes from Russia. And is piped through Ukraine. I should correct myself. Use that.
It's
properly.
hard. It's hard not to do that, though.
It is. It's hard to do. Now, one of the things that people don't often realize is the Libyans sign an energy agreement with Ukraine, and Ukraine is at the mercy, and I mean completely at the mercy of Russia for its gas, electric, oil. So they make a deal with the Libyans that, we will let you farm our land and you can take all the crops, use it however you want, in exchange for so many millions of barrels of oil, gas, and other energy producing products. And within a year, there's a Muammar Gaddafi out of power. And from my perspective, here's France, who's usually, on the bandwagon for, hey, let's not bomb anybody, suddenly leading the charge. There's Italy, who really is, hey, we don't want to bomb anybody, leading the charge to get rid of Muammar Gaddafi. Well, one of the things that happened in the meantime is Putin started talking about, well, where are you guys going to get your energy if you don't have it from us? Because the Libyans now have this deal with the Ukrainians. And the Ukrainians are taking a lot of the energy that could go to you. So suddenly Muammar Gaddafi's out. Well, that's a conspiracy theory I think that's worth listening to. One of the things about the Ukrainians are that they're a very proud people, but you have to keep in mind 80 years of having, there's 32 million people dead in the 1930s. Their population is only 46 million people now. So let's say, if you had that happen back then, they were completely depopulated.
Yep.
So you have this fear of Russia, and it's almost a Stockholm type syndrome. It's like you have to deal with Russia. There's not a way you can't, but at the same time, if there is a way that they could have any kind of faith that Europe would support them, that the United States would support them, they would bust towards the West in a heartbeat. This is one of the things, I always talk about unintended consequences. Bush's failure to have a strong response to the Georgian invasion, and whether you want to say Georgia started it, Russia started it, doesn't matter. The entire region watched how the United States responded. And the first thing that happened, and this is right before Yanukovych's reelection, that became an issue. How can we trust the West if they're not even going to support their ally? We're not even allies, and they're wanting us to come to their side, yet their own allies they won't support.
Do you think
that's how it was viewed?
Do you think that the United States hasn't? I mean, I think that it's pretty clear that Europe has a huge interest in bringing Ukraine into the fold.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
It's the Vladimir Putin proxy government. And usually when it comes to talking about geopolitics, when Russia and some of these Western European pieces start to fly, Doc and I tend to disagree a lot, but there's not a whole lot of disagreement about the puppet regime that Vladimir Putin has installed in Ukraine right now that's fouling up this pivot to the West that Ukraine has been trying to do. Not just recently. Like I said, these tensions have been simmering for an awfully long time.
Yes.
But I wonder, Russia, it can't be denied that under communist rule and then after communist rule in the 25 years or so, gosh.
It's been close to that.
25 years since Perestroika, that Russia has given a lot of aid to Ukraine, and we can all say, well, gosh, you subjugated that people, you depopulated them, you moved them out of the country, essentially. You owe them something, but are there enough Ukrainians that remember that aid and forget the bad stuff, who are nostalgic for the time when there was a little bit more security, a little more certainty in the world, kind of like in Russia, why Vladimir Putin is still popular in Russia, to give popular support to the regime, I guess, if we're going to call him that right now.
Well, and that's absolutely true. Now, Angela Merkel said it best when Ukrainians or Viktor Yanukovych said, we're not going to sign this agreement with the EU. She said, well, the unfortunate thing about Ukraine's relationship with the EU and Russia is Russia uses a carrot and stick approach, and the EU just uses a carrot. And part of what you need to understand is, if you have a benevolent bully down the way,
yep.
That he comes by and he says, listen, I'm going to give you this $1 if you let me poke you in the eye, right? He's going to poke you in the eye anyway, so you might as well take the $1. That's the relationship, really, that Ukraine and Russia has. Every time that there is any kind of problem, Russia will offer to help, but there's always a string. It's honestly like dealing with Satan. It doesn't matter what problem you're having, what deal you make with them, it's not going to be good. The couple of things that even Yanukovych hasn't done, the Ukrainian national gas companies, energy companies, he has not surrendered those to Russia. He has fought to keep those things independent, because without those, Ukraine has no way of being independent, making any kind of money. One of the things that I find that's interesting with this entire blow up that's going on right now in Ukraine is there have been reports that the Ukrainian military has taken to the streets to try to keep order, and they have not followed the orders that have been given, which is to, basically sweep the streets clear. They will sit there and prevent damage, but they are not arresting a lot of people. They're not firing on people. Their tanks are simply there. So this is one of those things where I think Yanukovych has to stop. This is going to be a dangerous time for Ukraine, because Yanukovych could ask the Russians for help. And in that case, there's no way the United States is going to go in there. If the United States actually knew what they were doing in their foreign policy, and this isn't a criticism directed at Obama, this is a general criticism of U.S. foreign policy in general, okay? If they knew what they were doing, they would say, hey, Ukraine, instead of giving the Egyptians and these other people that hate us $10-12 billion a year, we'll give you that same money, and we don't want anything in return. We just want elections that are held and are unbiased. That's all you'd have to do. And next thing you know, you would have every Ukrainian voting for America. Now, one of the things they do in Ukraine is you get these cards. And if you go in, you vote, you get a card at the voting center, and if you take it to the right people, you will get money or alcohol or whatever it is back. So it's straightforward vote buying. That's one of the problems with Ukraine is in the bigger cities this doesn't happen. But you have to keep in mind that the 6 big cities only account for about 12 to 15% of the population. So that's part of the problem you have with Ukraine.
Well, I guess a question that you brought to mind just now, if the U.S. made an actual overt push into Ukraine, like a visible, we're doing this, here, Ukraine, here's some aid, or we're going to put some hardware in, or turn over some planes or something. Don't you think that with Vladimir Putin's willingness to attack Georgia directly, whoever started, actually send troops into Georgia, there would be Russian tanks in the streets if the U.S. did that, wouldn't there be?
Yeah, and so,
he'd risk it, I think.
Well, the United States does have to be careful, but sending money is a far cry from sending material. And the other thing is if we would have responded with a warship group, sent a carrier group into the Black Sea in response to the Georgian invasion, that would have sent a much clearer response. But the problem is, and this goes back, we go all the way back to the Iraq War under George I. The problem is we've been so engrossed in the Middle East that we really haven't been able to pay attention to anything else. And the bottom line is as soon as we're extricated ourselves from, we needed to do one of two things. Either we needed to increase our military size, which we didn't truly do, or we needed to get out of these areas and get out of nation building. Nation building takes a lot of resources. Rebuilding Japan is still an ongoing thing. Rebuilding Germany is an ongoing thing. And part of the problem with dealing with the Russians is, and this is why Georgia is important, just to let people know why we care about what Georgia does. They're running a pipeline from the oil fields in Afghanistan, the energy fields. You have to look. I wish I had a map, but they're running pipelines for oil and natural gas right to the Black Sea and right to the Caspian Sea, so it can be exported to Europe and exported to China, right? That's why Georgia is important, because that's where those seaports are. And the part that they took, the one that I can't ever remember it, but it's like the prisoner of Azkaban, whatever that one is. It's not Azerbaijan.
Well, I don't know what you're trying to say.
But anyway, that particular region that the Russians took over has several of those pipelines going through it. So Russia took what essentially is Georgia's future by taking that. And you have to keep in mind that you have to play a delicate game here. The other thing is there is no way in God's green earth that the Russians could ever stand up militarily to the United States. There's not a country in the world that can do that. The problem really comes down to, do you really want to be involved in a war with Russia over Ukraine? And the answer is no. That doesn't serve our national interests. We'll be back right after the break. We'll start talking about some of the local things that are going on. Some very interesting polls coming out. And of course, I've been at several fundraisers since I've been home this weekend, and talked to a lot of people that are out and about trying to gain your support for the Senate race. We'll be back right after the break. You're listening to Doc and Lefty on webcast1live.com.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
Whether you're 10, 25, 50, 80 years old and beyond, everyone needs to live within their means. I'm Tom Coates with Consumer Credit of America. For almost a quarter of a century, we've helped people of all ages learn to manage their personal finances to benefit them far into the future. When problems arise, we've got the experience you need to make those debt problems go away. Got financial problems? Call Consumer Credit of America.
If Tom Coates from Consumer Credit of America was your personal webmaster, Tom would filter out all bad debt emails. If Tom was your mailman, you'd never get any debt reduction junk mail. If Tom Coates was a lineman, he'd block any phone calls offering to reduce your credit card debt.
Hi, I'm Tom Coates with Consumer Credit of America, and we're still your best choice for credit counseling. We're local, we're accountable, and we can do more. You make the call when the time's right for you.
When it comes to competition, there really is none for Consumer Credit of America.
Hey, welcome back, everybody. Thanks for sticking around. We're here, just the two of us. I thought that maybe we would kind of go mano a mano about international politics today, since you just got back, and I didn't want to overwhelm. I didn't want to overwhelm your reassimilation into the country by having a couple of guests here to kind of team up and really hand it to you.
Privyet, comrade.
But
Spasibo.
the other thing that that happened just last week, really, I commented on it at the top of the show last week, was really nobody knows what to call it yet, whether it's a historic deal or a historic mistake or just the first step in a trust but verify situation. The Iranians and the international team of negotiators, led by John Kerry in the United States, signed a tentative agreement to reduce production and get those cyclotrons to stop spinning as high, with the exchange of a very small amount of let up in the sanctions. We're talking about the nuke deal between the international community and Iran. And this, when you said over the break that when the enemy is celebrating in the streets about the deal, that you probably stepped in it. Well, my counter to that would be, when the Saudis and the Israelis are both really upset, you might have struck the right balance. And so my position on this at this point is that we don't know enough. It's still too new to really start going after people. But the constant opposition from the right about this deal, my question to you well,
it isn't just from the right.
It mainly is. It mainly is. The French didn't like the first deal, but have signed on to this one. My question to you, Doc, as the spokesperson for all of the right wing, I'm going to dub you that today. Will you not be satisfied until we send troops into Iran? Will you not be satisfied until we start dropping bombs on that country?
Don't even start with that.
Can't we give peace a chance?
Here's the thing. Chamberlain gave peace a chance with Hitler. Look how that came out. You want to talk about that?
No.
A couple of things. First of all, liberals always go, well, if you make your allies angry, we must have done something right. Making the Israelis angry and making the Saudi Arabians angry doesn't help us. Great. Give peace a chance. The second thing is, you said trust and verify. Great. We're going to trust they're not going to do it, but we have no way of verifying it. This accord does not say that every reactor is inspected by the UN. This has been one of the problems over and over, is the UN is not allowed to go in and inspect these reactors. It happened in Iraq. It's been going on in Iran the entire time. So the fact that you're sitting here going, well, great, let's give peace a chance by not allowing these people to go in and verify that the reactors are offline really is silly. There's nothing in this agreement that says we get to verify on all these reactors, just some of them.
It is the first step in a completely frozen process for the last 37 years, number one. Number two, the constant. All right. See, now I was slumped over. I was doing the host thing, but now you got me riled up. The constant comparison of this deal to Munich is absolutely ridiculous. It's the stupidest thing that I've heard come out of the right since, I don't know, the last time George W. Bush mispronounced a word. Or should I say mispronunciated it, however you want to call it. First of all, when Neville Chamberlain went to Munich and signed the deal with Adolf Hitler, Germany was the second biggest economy in the world. The Brits had nothing. They had no leverage whatsoever. The United States was standing out of it. They had to make a deal with him because there was no one else to make a deal with. That's just how it went down. Okay?
You're the one that said peace in our time.
So we're talking about Iran, which has the GDP of what, the defense budget, We don't need to make a deal with them. We're extending them a little bit. We're extending them a tiny baby carrot of sanctions relief, which they were so happy to get that they celebrated in the streets, not praising the deal, but celebrating a little bit of the let up. And we're going to call this Munich? Are you kidding?
Well, the bottom line is short of a military option, which Obama has always left on the table.
And it's still on the table.
And it's still on the table.
And if they violate this deal, the sanctions snap back down harder, which is something that Neville Chamberlain couldn't get done with Hitler.
The bottom line is, I'm looking at it right here, right straight off of Google. Senate Democrats, Obama on collision course over Iran. Democratic senators pushing for new Iran sanctions. All of this has happened. This is not a good thing. Sitting there, when you have somebody who's not willing to negotiate, when they started to negotiate and let UN inspectors in, is when George Bush invaded Iraq. That's when they let them in.
And they built thousands and thousands of more reactors since then. So
they haven't built thousands
and thousands. Yes, they have. There are thousands. There are thousands. When before George Bush took office, there were 19.
What it takes to build a nuclear reactor.
Before George Bush took office, they had 19. They were in the single digits with the reactors, and they are up over 1,500 at this point. So the George Bush non-policy with Iran didn't work. This is the first sort of step to any kind of thawing of relations with the rest of the world in Iran, which is crucial. It's absolutely necessary.
The rest of the world doesn't want this. The French stepped in the first time.
And now okay with this one. So I don't know what you want. I don't know what your problem is.
Well, the bottom line is they still aren't happy with this. If you look at the now I understand I have the advantage. I was overseas. I did get to see all these international headlines. Turks are not happy with it. The Israelis aren't happy with it. The Germans are
the Israelis won't be happy until they send troops into Iran.
Well, and granted, and the Saudi Arabians aren't happy. The Germans have been careful not to go, hey, this is dumb, but that's essentially what they've said in that kind of speech. The French came out outright on the first time and said, well, if I was a diplomat, I would say this is the dumbest thing they've ever done, according to the first one. Then the only difference between the first one and this one is now the UN gets to inspect some of them, not all of them. The problem really is how are you going to stop Iran from getting a nuclear weapon? Now, I understand Ron Paul, who's a Republican, has said, geez, they haven't made one yet. But the bottom line is you can't sit here and say, listen, this country that has sworn destruction of other countries is going to be safe having nuclear weapons. I mean, that's just
no one's saying that, though. No one's saying that. Who said that?
But the other thing is a very clever distraction from the woes of Obamacare. And because I was all gunned up to come in here and talk about Obamacare, but then I thought, I'll save that till next week because I'd like to see how the fix Obama has done. But the bottom line is suddenly there's this giant push to have some kind of success somewhere in foreign policy overseas. You had Obama going to Afghanistan to negotiate a treaty, essentially. Well, that's not Obama's job.
He sent Susan Rice. He didn't go.
Yeah, he was in Afghanistan.
Susan Rice went to Afghanistan.
No, President Obama was in Afghanistan meeting with Karzai. He did a George Bush. He took off and spent a day in that. Remember when we talked about the apology tour and everything else, how he went over there to apologize? Well, that's essentially what he was doing. If he wasn't going to be over there to apologize, then what was he doing there? Number two, he has to have some kind of foreign policy success somewhere because his foreign policy has been miserable. Don't get me wrong. I'm not defending George Bush and his policies. I hate it when I have to do that. But the bottom line is, and we get back to the cultural psychology, this, not understanding the cultural psychology of what we're dealing with, trying to get, benefits in our foreign policy that aren't going to be there because we don't understand what they're trying to do. Now we're gonna go to a break, even though I think I won that one. Do I get a POW or anything? No. Frank says I didn't win.
I would just the only thing that I would say is whenever there's the least little bit of any kind of progress anywhere in the world,
but this isn't progress.
Any progress anywhere in the world, leave it to Republicans, leave it to conservatives, leave it to the conservative hive mind to come in and squash the thing.
But when you go backwards on an agreement, When you say, all right, since you won't follow the agreement, we'll come up with one that you won't follow either, that still isn't progress. So getting somebody to sign a piece of paper doesn't mean progress. So getting somebody to change their behavior is progress. Getting a nation to be less belligerent is progress, and this accomplishes neither one of them.
Let's talk about George Bush, North Korea, and what they're doing now, and talk about progress.
Yeah, like I said, I'm not defending George Bush policies. We'll be back right after the break. You're listening to Doc and Lefty on webcast1live.com.
Petrosian Associates, how can I help you?
Petrosian Associates will provide you with a friendly, caring, and confidential place to find help for mental health concerns. We are ready for your call. Our doctor, Dr. J. Patrick Petrosh, provides a full range of psychiatric services for children, adolescents, and adults in a forthright and informative manner while maintaining a casual, comfortable, and relaxed atmosphere.
Get away from us, you mean old credit card. We don't have any more money. We're in trouble now. Save us! Help! Somebody save us! Somebody help! Help! Save us!
Hi, I'm Tom Coates from Consumer Credit of Des Moines. If your credit card's a little too animated, give us a call.
Hooray! We're saved! Consumer Credit, you're our hero!
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast 1 Live.
Hey, welcome back, everybody. Thanks for sticking around. We're in the home stretch, as I like to call it. So, Doc, I want to extend my hand of peace across the table. And
only if the UN can inspect it.
Only a little bit, and only maybe one the last
just the perching finger.
The last Thursday of the 14th month of the year is when we'll allow those inspectors in.
Well, at least we agree on that,
right? So. But we so I guess you had mentioned. You'd mentioned Obamacare, and maybe it would be a better for maybe the first half of next week's show to talk about it, because I think that it's going to have some pretty serious implications for 2014, but maybe not exactly what people are planning for. I think that that some of the developments with the website and some of the more obvious attempts to sabotage the exchanges in the states are going to lead us into a different, not necessarily, the political win that every Democrat is, praying to Santa Claus for Christmas. I'm not saying that. I'm not going out that far, but I don't think it's going to be the unmitigated disaster that the Republicans do. But we can save that for next week. That'll be a little bit of a tease to bring you in, where we put on our boxing gloves about affordable health care one more time, and maybe I won't take it on the chin so bad from your family.
It should be changed. The name should be changed, not so affordable healthcare.
Oh, did you spend your vacation thinking of that little nugget?
I just came up with that just now. Yeah, I spent the entire time I was asleep on the plane.
I'm gonna zing Lefty with a new name for the Healthcare Act.
Well, now that segues pretty nice to this next one. There's been several polls released here right around Thanksgiving talking about the Senate race here, particularly in Iowa.
Yes, yeah.
And Bruce Braley appears to be in a lot of trouble early on. Now, the problem is, and Matt Whitaker said this, you can't really buy into these polls at this time.
Right.
I mean, you got 6 months, 8 months down the road.
Republicans don't have a candidate.
Yeah. And, it's a year. The actual election's, almost a year away. Mm-hmm. And, you can't put a lot of stock into it. And that was his response to, asking him about his own poll that showed he was probably the most likely to be able to beat Bruce Braley. Now, the problem is Bruce's numbers statewide have not really gone much above 42%.
Yep.
They list a lot of things, Obamacare being one of them, that he's not personally likable. He's rather distant and standoffish. I mean, that's just what what the results are.
Well, I'd seen 45, but right in that, but that's tracking even as far as name recognition with a bunch of folks people have never heard of. And that early, if you're going to put any stock in early polling, that would be a gigantic problem for the Braley campaign.
Yeah.
Gigantic.
Yes.
And kind of I guess not so unexpected given the problems Democrats have had over the last 3 months, but certainly unexpected when you've got a lone Democrat who has name recognition and who has national name or who has statewide name recognition because of some of the stances he's taken with pieces of legislation he's gotten passed in Congress. and he didn't have a primary. He doesn't have anybody to run against. So polling this low is not good. It's as clunky as the website rollout has been.
Yes. Well, and I would agree with that. Matt Whitaker in one poll was shown to be the one most likely to be able to beat Bruce Braley.
I'm surprised by that.
Well, but one poll it's Sam Clovis, one poll it's Joni Ernst, and so this latest one they listed all of them to see which one would be most likely beat. Matt Whitaker happened to be the top. Now, according to the Iowa Republican, they said Matt Whitaker then declared himself the front runner. I asked Matt directly about that, and he says I think they probably took it out of context, and that he doesn't think that he's a front runner. He also said that, counting on polls at this time is really, you got so much time left. I also asked him about fundraising, since it appears that the Republicans are having some problems fundraising. And he just said, you have 6-7 people running, and nobody is going to back a horse, this early in the race until some other people drop out. And that's very straightforward. He also says that, once they determine who the primary winner is going to be, that the Republican candidate will be very well funded on a national and state level. Well, and that's what he said.
The one, if I'm going to rain on a Republican's parade, and if there's one Republican's parade I like to rain on, it's Matt Whitaker. The issue that they're going to have is who comes out with the clear majority. I think the rules say you have to get more than 35% to keep it from going to a convention, and that's a huge problem right now. I don't think there's anybody right in the latest, and you're looking at the latest poll, so you can correct me. But as of last week, not a single one of those candidates, and a new guy just jumped in.
Mark Jacobs.
Mark Jacobs just jumped in, and no one's polling at even close to 35% at this point, and so. If this becomes a convention, and heaven forfend if it becomes any kind of brokered convention, you're going to see the very real splits in Iowa Republican politics really rear its ugly head, and that can only help Bruce Braley.
All right. Now, this is what this poll said. Although Congressman Braley is well known across the state, he's not exactly well liked. This poll shows more than 60% of voters know enough about Bruce Braley to form an opinion. Yet they barely favor the Eastern Iowa liberal over Republican they have either never heard of or do not know very well. And then the Republican candidates who are most pleased with this poll are Matt Whitaker and Mark Jacobs, obviously.
Right.
Whitaker trails Braley by just 3 points, 41-38. Mark Jacobs polls the second best against Braley, 41-37. That has to spell some problems for them. They're all fairly close, all the GOP candidates. Now, another poll conducted by the Citizens United Political Victory Fund, and that's that, of course, the Citizens United done, showed prominent Christian conservative Uncle Bob Vanderplatz well ahead of the Republican field, and and ahead of Bruce Braley.
I don't mean to laugh at Uncle Bob. And I'm not laughing at Uncle Bob. I'm laughing at the optimism of that poll. If you put a 4-time Iowa electoral loser like Bob Vanderplatz against anybody at this point.
Well, if they hadn't run the governor this last time against Bob Vanderplatz, you and I both know Bob would have taken the primary.
Yep.
And 2, had a very good shot at beating Culver, despite how polarizing he is. Because that's one of the things you have to watch.
Well,
out with
I
Bob
think if we're gonna talk about a good chance, are you talking 50.5 to 49.5? Because
no,
I think
talking 60 to 40.
I think Culver would have won that election.
Yeah.
And we all know how little I appreciated the Culver administration.
Yeah.
Just from the job that it did. But Bob Vanderplat, he would have carried Woodbury, Plymouth, Sioux, O'Brien, Lyon, all those counties.
He would have lost Polk County,
and then lost the East and lost Polk County. Absolutely, he would have.
So, but I still believe that I think now the Republican leadership thought differently. But I thought if you stuck Bob Vanderplaats up in a debate against Chet Culver,
Well,
Bob Vanderplaats would have crushed him. There is the only other speaker I can think of that is more dynamic than he is Newt Gingrich. And whether you like him or not, these guys are excellent speakers. Now I have never heard President Obama personally, so I'm going to leave him out. But in a debate, Bob Vanderplaats would have dominated because Chet Culver isn't good at that. I mean, he was kind of like the governor.
Yeah.
So it's just one of those things. So anyway, that's the latest on the U.S. Senate race here in Iowa. I got a lot of good information this weekend. People are still out there very hopeful that their campaigns have a chance. And like we talked with Ed Bull last time that I was on, Mark Jacobs really had one heck of a rollout. I mean, his flyers are everywhere. I've gotten 2, both of them different. So he's really out there doing well.
We can't. I want to leave it. We're running out of time, but I want to pose one last question, and I want you to take it seriously. I want you to take it seriously.
You're just not trying to poke me.
I'm not. I'm really not. But 2016, Tom Vilsack's out of a job. 2018, Terry Branstad's up for re-election. What if old Tom comes back to Iowa in 2018? What do you think about that?
That's a pretty interesting thing. I think that here's the thing. I think Vilsack is respected enough by both sides of the aisle.
Yep.
That
most popular Democratic governor we've had in a long time.
And I think that if he stays out in Washington, D.C., the next Republican administration will probably have a job for him, number one. Number two, I think that Tom Vilsack likes being in Washington, D.C. I've ridden on the plane next to him several times, flying here and there.
He's not,
And, I think he likes it out there, and I think he's going to be, and he's competent, and he's going to be offered a job out there doing something, even if it's a Democrat or Republican. 3, I think if Branstad runs, he's going to run in, let's say he runs in 2018, okay, for whatever reason the governor does. Mm-hmm. I think that the governor is so popular, doesn't matter how much he screws it up, he's going to get reelected. Well, so short of the governor retiring, I don't think Vilsack's coming back.
This will be 6 years. This will be 6 terms if and when we're just going to give it to him now. But if he wins in 2014, I think that you're hearing a lot of Democrats talk about, well, we can't have this guy be 6-term governor. That they're really running on him being in the office too long. Another term would. That sounds a little bit foolish now, or at least grasping at straws. That straw gets a little bit more of a firm thing if he runs for a 7th. That would be he's already going to win the record. He's already got the record tied up. If he goes for 7 terms, that's longer than it's not longer than I've been alive, but that's a good chunk of my lifetime.
And that's true. I think that as soon as Branstad steps aside, my personal feeling is Bob Vanderplaats is going to give it another run, and I think another person's going to give it a run is either I think Jim Gibbons and Rod Roberts are going to make another run because they're doing the circuit.
Well, I understand that, but Uncle Bob, he might as well. He's got nothing left to lose. His reputation in Iowa is pretty well set.
Yeah,
and that's not you can take that however you want, folks, whether a knock or not. That's me stating a fact. He's got a reputation. Everyone knows who he is. Everyone knows what he stands for. And he doesn't run from his record.
No, he doesn't.
He doesn't. And whether you think that's if you're a political strategist, you think that's a good thing or a bad thing, it depends on what side of the aisle you fall on, I guess. But
all you got to do is look at Romney, right? You get somebody who's up there flip-flopping on stuff, just trying to get people's votes, you lose people's respect.
Well, Rick Santorum didn't do very well in the last presidential election.
No, he didn't. So
there, right. That is too. Well, I think we're out of time, pal.
Yep. All right. Thanks a lot, everybody, for tuning in. We'll be back next week. We're both Lefty and I are gonna be slugging it out over Obamacare again. So, got anything coming up this week?
Not really this week. Just kind of plugging along before the next holiday. It's that time of year.
Yep. So, all right. See everybody next week.
Yep. Cheers.
Hi, I'm Representative Tom Shaw, and I love these guys. Both of them.
Love these guys. Get over here. Love both of them.